Hey everyone, and welcome to our event today. My name is Josh, and I'm with the Orange County Library System. I'm here today for our event, DIY compost. Worm bins. We're here with Charlie from O Town Compost. They're a fantastic local organization that will help you with food scraps and taking them out of the trash cycle and keeping our landfill much smaller and keeping a much more environmentally friendly Orlando. They're a fantastic org. Charlie's a great guy. He's helped us out with a few events before. But before we get started, I just wanted to share one more thing. At the end of the event, if you liked what you saw, you want to see more events like this, we will be posting a survey in the chat. And if you click on that link, you can take that survey. It's really short. Tell us what you liked about it. Tell us what you didn't. And we can take that information into the future and make programs that you guys like a lot better. I'll also be sharing O-Town Compost's Facebook and website. So definitely give those a check out too if you're interested in that service. It's really great. And without any further ado, let me bring on Charlie here. Hey, Charlie, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good.
Glad
Thanks,
to be here.
Josh, for the introduction.
Of course.
Yeah, just real quick, I'm Charlie Pioli, the founder of O-Town Compost. I started this company about 9 months ago when I saw that there was a lack of food waste recycling infrastructure in the Orange County, Orlando area. Plenty of people wanted to compost or recycle their food scraps, but to no avail. There just wasn't any composting facility or anaerobic digester. So yeah, let me share my screen and get into this.
Awesome. Let me get out of your hair, and thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Let's see. Well, just not seeing the right PowerPoint application to share.
You can also just share your screen itself, and it will cover over the video for now. But once we get into it, yeah, perfect.
There we go.
All
Got
right.
it. Okay. So, O-Town Compost is Orlando's community composter. Community composting isn't unique to Orlando. There's been a grassroots movement that started about 10 years ago, where small towns and cities around the country, there's been, a movement of people who are collecting food scraps, recycling them locally in the community, and kind of supporting urban agriculture or local food growing. And they're kind of hand in hand with community composting. I actually used to be a subscriber when I was in college and lived in Boston, Massachusetts. I subscribed for Bootstrap Compost, which now is a much bigger company, and they're in Providence, Rhode Island, and some other towns around. O-Town Compost, our flagship service, is our residential food scrap collection service, where we give people a 5-gallon bucket, airtight lid, and a compostable liner. We pick up from people's porches either weekly or bi-weekly and just swap out their bucket for a new one. So we take care of the processing and do the composting for you, and then twice a year we return the finished compost to you. Or you can choose to donate it if you don't have any use. We partner with Fleet Farming so they can receive your share. There's no odors, no pests. It's a very convenient valet service. We do zero waste events. You can imagine that's kind of on the back burner for now. We do commercial businesses like offices, restaurants, retail. And we recently started a new service at the beginning of the pandemic for to help some stables and ranches in the area with their manure management. Typically, stables, will spread the raw manure on their pasture, which is a vector. It really attracts, flies who lay their eggs in it, and that's why we have to give the horses medication to deworm. So yeah, typically the style of composting I use is called aerated static pile method. It's a static bin, meaning I don't have to turn it. And the reason people turn their compost is to expose it to air. And oxygen is really the key to composting. So with this aerated static pile method, I'm reaching those heats about 140 Fahrenheit, which is killing all the pathogens, weed seeds, larvae. There's no odors because when you have enough oxygen and the moisture levels are right, you're not experiencing like those foul anaerobic smells. Anaerobic meaning there is no oxygen, and those are when you really smell the stinky smells. And the greatest part of all about these bins is there's no turning. So this is our service area. We service from like College Park to UCF, east to west, and north as far as Lake Jessup, south as far as the Florida Mall. But really, these blue pins you see are our residential subscribers. Red pins are commercial. But really, I picture this map in about 5 or 10 years where, it's just covered in blue pins, and we're taking a serious bite out of the food waste in the county, in the city of Orlando. It's my goal to just scale and have as big an impact as I can, so Orlando can become a sustainable city similar to San Francisco or Portland, Oregon, Austin, Texas. So why, my personal opinion is composting is more important for environmental benefits than recycling. You look at recycling today, and it's really not working due to an increase in contamination. Orlando has about a 30% contamination rate. So when the truckloads of recyclables get to the recycling center, they're dumped on the ground, and they take one look to assess, are these clean recyclables? Or are they contaminated? They reject the load right there. It gets scooped up and then sent to the landfill. And that's true for about, 90-95% of the loads in Orange County right now. But and then additionally, recyclables are commodities. They're shipped around the world, brought to the nearest port, and really transported very far and wide. So you have to question, what are the environmental benefits? Community composting, on the other hand, is a local, organics recycling, where the food scraps that are generated in Orange County stay in Orange County. And additionally, compost sequesters greenhouse gases. By not sending the food scraps to the landfill, you're avoiding a huge chunk of methane emissions, because at the landfill, you'll see in this picture, the trucks dump out their garbage, and then every day they're required to cover the garbage with fill, and that is a way that they suppress any odors and don't receive neighbor complaints. But by covering the trash, you're really mummifying any organic waste underneath, in that anaerobic environment, and it's releasing methane into the atmosphere, which is many times more potent than CO2. Some might argue that the recycling industry does spur more economic growth. More jobs are probably locked up in the recycling industry. But they're not necessarily good jobs. Think of someone on a conveyor belt in Omaha, Nebraska, for example, who, they typically hire like immigrants and for who are willing to accept very low wages and deal with risky conditions. So community composting is right now O-Town Compost is only a 2-person operation, but I'm really looking to hire more passionate individuals as we grow. And then most importantly, compost fosters life. It fosters plants. A handful of compost is almost like a universe of life. If you think about all the bacteria and microbes, nematodes that are living in that handful. Composting is important because it all starts with the soil health. Healthy soil means healthy plants, which means healthy animals, healthy humans, and overall just healthy economy. You look at some ancient civilizations, and historians have noticed that they're fallen because their soil just couldn't support their growth in population, and the soil turned to a desert like ancient Rome or the Aztec Empire. It really has to do with, can the soil support the number of hungry mouths? And what's really interesting about soil is it's, not all carbon is bad. The bacteria that lives in soil actually feeds on carbon. And that's why, when you're in the composting process, you are releasing carbon into the atmosphere. But then once you have a finished, stabilized composting product, it's actually sequestering carbon, and soil holds carbon. So when farmers do something like till or plow their fields, disrupting the soil, it's actually releasing, amazing amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. I would highly recommend the documentary on Netflix called Kiss the Ground. It was recently released like 2 days ago, and it's super informational, talks about how we overcome the climate crisis. I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, and you'll see in this bottom photo, it was last time I was in Portland, I was able to tour their commercial scale composting facility where they're sending residential yard waste and food waste. And, they're also have an aerated static pile system, but they're using much larger pipes than I'm using in my bin. And also, they're composting just, hundreds of cubic yards at a time, but they're getting really great compost out of it. And the compost is going to the nearby farms to, use on the farms, which is a great source of organic matter and a great alternative to the artificial fertilizers that some farmers use. A big thing you have to think about in the composting industry is contamination. Is a lot of plastics, glass, wax covered paper products. Are they ending up in the stream? And these are things that don't break down, they're inert, and they just create a headache for commercial scale composters. It's my dream in about 8 or 10 years that the city of Orlando, Orange County, Winter Park will have a pay-as-you-throw garbage system, and alongside our trash bins, we'll have curbside compost collection and recycling. And by pay as you throw, that's an economic, that's like a program that is used in some cities around the nation where you're charged based on the size of your cart that you're using, meaning that people who use smaller carts pay less. So there's an economic incentive to reduce your trash generation and use your other carts like recycling and compost. So now getting into individual level composting, I know this presentation is supposed to be about worm bins, but I just wanted to briefly mention a couple of styles of composting before I go out in my back patio and do the DIY. Tumblers are those rotating drums that you see. They can work, but remember that they're like batch composters. So, if you're someone like me where you're constantly generating food waste and coffee grounds, they're not gonna work out very well for you because you are supposed to fill them up and then like do the turning for a few weeks in order to get finished compost. The city of Orlando bins, they're called earth machines. The city of Orlando gives out free composters for people's backyard. I've seen, I know for a fact that these don't work well because I've seen a lot of people just put them out to the curb so the trash guy can take them. But also I have one in my backyard that I use because, it's out there, but it's just hard to reach your pitchfork down into it and turn it. It doesn't get great air because it's like a plastic box and, they're not the best. And compost takes management. In this photo, you'll see like some bays that I built out of pallets. That works out pretty well. Just got to make sure you're turning the pile to get a hot compost. Composting trenches are when people dig trenches, throw their food scraps in them, and then bury them, which does work, but it kind of mimics the landfill where you're cutting the food scraps off from oxygen, and as a result, you're producing methane emissions. And that would be a form of anaerobic composting. Another form of anaerobic composting is the kashi method, which is a method of fermenting your food scraps. It was created in Japan, actually. And you get like a 5-gallon bucket, you put your food scraps in the bucket, and you have like a handful of grain, which spurs the microbes to start the fermentation process. You close the lid to the bucket, wait about a couple of weeks. So there's no air. The fermentation is happening without air. But when you open up the bucket, there's like a sweet fermenty smell to the food scraps. There's not a foul anaerobic smell. And that's really interesting. There's actually a community composter in San Antonio, Texas, who uses this method to much success. I just briefly want to talk about odors and pests, the two big deterrents that composters face, among just a lack of knowledge. I know people want to do the right thing with their food scraps, but just may not have done the research, or they don't know what is true, what is false. I would say if you're really composting, you can feel it because your pile is producing heat, and that heat means that the microbes are active in the pile. They're eating the sources of carbon. Your food waste is decomposing, breaking down. And when it's hot, there's no risk of a critter digging into it, because the critter is going to dig into it and feel that it's hot and be automatically deterred. All the flies are going to, not want to get into it because they don't want to lay eggs in it because the heat's going to kill it. But that's why it's important when you're composting is to not have any exposed food scraps. And this is also semi-true for worm bins, because once you expose the food scraps to the air, that's going to attract fruit flies, other flies, black soldier fly larvae, which black soldier fly larvae aren't harmful. They're those like big fat larvae you see in the warmer months here in Florida. But they're not harmful. They just eat the food waste. They pupate, turn into a fly, and then fly away. The fly doesn't even have a mouth and is pretty much there only to lay eggs. And yeah, I mean, the other things with compost that you need to know is just make sure you're turning your backyard pile, which is exposing it to oxygen and giving the bacteria the oxygen they need to break down the food waste. Otherwise, if it's not getting oxygen, that's where you'll start to get those really bad anaerobic smells. What I tell my commercial clients is food waste collection, like source separating food scraps from the normal garbage, can be a way to clean up their trash smell. And you go to a restaurant's dumpster behind the restaurant, and it's like a bomb went off. So this is a great way to keep things clean and also do the right thing environmentally. So now we're going to get into vermicomposting, and I'm going to do a presentation in my back patio, but I want to mention that I use the Florida red wigglers. They're the most pervasive and the most tolerant of heat. They're one of the fastest eaters too, and they're just I think they're native to Central Florida. So they're the type of worms that I would recommend using. I know some people use the European night crawlers because they're big and they're like really great for fishing if you want to use them as bait because they get so big. But if you're doing a worm bin for the purpose of food waste recycling or to get the worm castings for fertilizer, I would recommend the Florida red wigglers. Setting up a bin is as simple as I'll show you. It's as simple as having like a tub, like a plastic tub, drilling some holes in it, adding some bedding, and just putting the worms in there. And the stat I would mention about red wigglers is they typically can eat their body weight in a day. They're slow eaters if you consider how much food scraps we produce as an individual. No way you can expect them to eat everything that you produce and just keep up on a schedule like that. But they can eat their body weight in a day. So, you got a pound of red wigglers in your worm bin. You could probably feed them like one banana peel a day and it'll be gone. They eat faster during the cooler months, and it's important to put your worm bin in a shady spot during the warm months. They'll still survive during the summer, but they're just going to be a little slower eating. And then what's left after you harvest the castings are amazing fertilizer with lots of nutrients from the food waste that the worms have broken down and digested. The worms have like a great enzymes, and what's left is like a premium black gold. So yeah, before we go outside, if anyone is interested in subscribing for our residential service, we do the composting for you, and we come to your door to pick up your bucket. It's actually been pretty successful. We're up to 83 subscribers. Well, here is your promo code for your first month free. Just when you are subscribing on our website, please just type in Orange Blossom and you should get your first month free for bi-weekly service. Okay, briefly, let me Let me go get my girlfriend who can help demonstrate.
Awesome.
Do we have any questions before we do that?
Yeah, if you wanted to start getting set up, we have quite a few questions that have been going, but yeah, up to you. We can wait till after if you'd rather.
I'll be right back.
Perfect. Yeah, like Charlie was saying, if you do have any questions, I've been seeing them in the comments. I'll be asking them in order that they were received. So we'll definitely be getting all those questions. Yeah.
Okay, you can go ahead now.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, let's get going through some of these. Make sure I have this. All right. So the first question that we got was, you said that you served all the way up to the Florida Mall. Do you serve the Meadowwood Lake Nona area yet?
Not yet. Unfortunately, I'm looking to do a drop-off program in Lake Nona. I'm trying to find a partner who's willing to host a couple bins. And, it would be a little bit different than our pickup service, but I hope to get out there eventually.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Is there and say we had the same thing with Windermere. Someone asking about the Windermere area.
Same thing. I'm talking with the Winter Garden Farmers Market, who would be a great host for our drop-off bins, but I'm hoping to get out there soon.
Yeah, that's good. The Winter Garden Farmers Market I think would be a perfect place.
Yeah.
So we had Stacy with like a little bit of a concern here. I have always liked the pay-as-you-throw model as an idea, but you have fears that it might spur some people to illegally dump garbage in order to avoid paying. Do you know of any data to show how much of this is happening in municipalities that are using the system?
So this came up. I recently shared an article about the pay-as-you-throw system on my LinkedIn account, and this same concern came up. I think generally the industry knowledge is there isn't any risk of illegal dumping, but I will try to find out more of data. But I would say like our current system, we don't have pay as you throw, and our current system isn't preventing illegal dumping either. But I know that my parents have they're on a pay as you throw system in Portland, Oregon, and in their neighborhood, I would say there's no Indian cases of illegal dumping. Like people aren't going to their neighbor's cart to put in like the extra trash. But yeah, I hope to find some like empirical evidence for sure.
Cool. And then we have just one more question, which I don't know if you had answered or were planning on answering. Where do we get the worms?
Yeah, I sell the red wigglers, like a quarter pound of red wigglers for $10. That's enough to get you started for a worm bin. Otherwise, there's a couple, like the only other person I can think of, I call him the Worm King because he has like this huge operation out in East Orlando on the corner of Rouse and East Colonial, and his name is Ted. If you're looking for like larger scale worms and a different variety of worms, than the red wigglers, feel free. I can share his information through Josh. So
Cool. Yeah, and so you can check out the red wigglers that you sell on your website.
Or just, you can email me, and my email is on my website. It's info@o-towncompost.com. So
Cool. Awesome. And then, one more just came in. Do worms only eat green compostables, especially food scraps, or will they eat your carbon-rich materials as well?
they're not going to eat your carbon-rich stuff, but the carbon-rich stuff is great bedding for the worms. They move through it, and you got to make sure you wet it down. But at the same time, they're not going to eat it the foods they particularly like are like the soft foods. They have like gizzards rather than, mouths with teeth. So that's why some people recommend putting a little grit in your worm bin so that I guess they get that leverage and can really eat faster. But, they love melons, they love papaya, those softer foods. And be wary, any food scraps you put into your bin, they're going to break it down, and what's going to be left is the seeds. So when you plant those worm castings, you're going to get a ton of volunteer vegetables and fruits, which you might like that, which I know I did. I have a couple of papayas in my yard from my worm bin. So
Bonus. That's
yeah.
pretty cool. Yeah. So were you still needed? I think we went through the questions. Did you
Yeah.
need?
I'll start real quick. Do you know how to like turn around the camera?
Yeah. So there's a little gear cam mic right there that you can select, and then pick your settings there.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah, if you have any more questions, we'll do another Q&A at the end, guys. So please continue to keep those coming. And throughout the event, seeing Charlie make his bin, we will, I'm sure questions will pop up. So yeah, check it out.
Hi there. So I'm gonna demonstrate to you guys how to set up a worm bin. As you can see, I'm an enthusiast. I have 3 worm bins back here. And at my composting site, I've repurposed a couple old bathtubs from neighbors who are remodeling their bathrooms. I've turned those into worm bins as well. But I'm in it for the food waste recycling, and I like the worm castings. Here's an example of a bin I just set up. Can you come get a look inside of it? So I just you start your worm bin with an organic material for the bedding. And here I've used like some mulch, but not, the wood chips shouldn't be too big. You can use peat moss, horse manure, like composted horse manure. You can use compost itself, leaves, or shredded paper. If as long as it's organic, the worms will be happy moving through it. Once you've added your bedding for the worms, you want to wet it down. They like the moisture, and they move more easily through it if it's moist. And remember, worms are very sensitive to sun, so it's important to put your worm bin in a very shady spot. Sun and heat. So after you moisten it down, you're gonna want to add in your worms, and then maybe start them off with like some food waste. These are my morning coffee grounds from breakfast today. So coffee is great. It actually makes them eat faster because they get a little bit buzzed. And then, it might take a day or two for the worms to get acclimated. But once they do, they'll start eating what you give them. I want to show this bin. This bin is currently the most active bin I have right now. And you can see, like, you want to buy one of these rakes, a gentle rake. It really works great in not hurting the worms. But you can see, like, this one is rich with worms. Also, I have a bunch of ants in my bin. They're just small ants, and they're attracted to the food waste that I leave on top of the pile. They're not really a big deal, but this is why I have my bin outside. If I wanted to put my worm bin inside, it would be important to always cover the food waste with the bedding. See how I covered that carrot? If you're covering it, that's gonna keep the fruit flies and the ants at bay. And then also, the worm bins don't like light, so naturally they like to come up and eat the food waste from the bottom, like similar to a forest floor. And then an important thing to remember, you want to harvest the worm castings. How do you actually get the worm castings when you've noticed that they've eaten through it? So this bin, this is a great example of black gold worm castings. They've eaten through this side pretty well, and what's left behind is kind of like a crumbly black. There's some seeds in here, so that's not a big deal. But when you want to harvest, what I did was take the worm bin, move all the bedding to one side. So I moved all the bedding to one side, and then I started a new side of bedding, same procedure. You put down the bedding, you water it down a little bit, and you put new food waste. After you put new food waste, wait a couple of days. Some of the worms hopefully are going to migrate over, leaving behind the worm castings. But, some might remain in the worm castings. So the way you harvest the worm castings is you peel layer by layer, and the worms don't like the light, so they'll keep going down. Like that one clearly is trying to get the heck out of here. So that is a great way to be able to harvest your castings, unless you have like a trommel screen, one of those drums that rotate. There's no like automatic way to harvest them. Let's see. So, a worm bin is pretty easy. I would recommend just like a plastic tub a storage container that most people have lying around, a little hand rake like this, and maybe a watering can. And, I probably, among these three bins, these worms can eat probably, they probably can eat all the food waste that my girlfriend and I generate in a day. So yeah, thank you. And I'm going to go back inside so I can answer your guys' questions. Okay, were there any questions, or did I neglect some information?
I think it was really cool to see, and I really like how how you could do it in such a small space, and it's so like kind of easy enough barrier of entry to just get into. Just buy a couple of worms, and get some leaves and start throwing your stuff into there. So I think that's
it's hard to actually kill them. If I left the bins out in the sun,
sure,
that would be the only way I can think of where you can actually kill the worms.
Right.
So.
The direct sunlight. So awesome. Yeah, we did have a few questions that came in through here. What worms or bugs do you not want to have in your compost? Are there anything that you should be worried about once you see them?
I would say I leave the lid slightly open, and sometimes I do get lizards or frogs in there. And you know what? I thought they were eating the worms themselves, but the worms are actually buried under. They're not at risk so much. What you are going to get in your worm bin are black soldier fly larvae, especially if you leave the food waste on the top. And the black soldier fly larva is what the frogs and the lizards love to eat.
Oh,
It's a cycle, and it
yeah.
doesn't really harm your worms at all. It's not something to really be concerned about. But
Okay.
yeah.
And someone asked about moldy foods. Are they harmful to worms at all, or no?
No, the rumor is that worms don't like citrus, but they don't like citrus, but they will eat it. It will be one of the last thing they eat. And if you have like an orange, you want to like puncture a hole through it. That way they have some access point. They can't really get through the skin.
Okay, gotcha.
But one thing I forgot to mention about the worm bedding is they don't like no salt content. That is gonna kill them. So make sure if you're like buying some kind of compost or manure from Home Depot or Lowe's. First of all, I wouldn't recommend that stuff, but make sure it doesn't have salt content.
Gotcha. That's yeah, good point. And I think the last question that we have here so far is, should my compost bin be in the sun? I think this is versus the worm bin, because we know the worm bin needs to be in the shade, but how about the compost bin?
Yeah, so the compost, there's definitely a myth out there that compost should be in the sun because it heats up the pile. I mean, your compost isn't going to heat up because of the sun or the ambient temperature. Your compost is heating up because of the microbial life inside the pile. So I don't think it matters if your compost bin is in the sun or the shade. But one thing to be careful of is make sure you're not putting it near an oak tree where you'll have roots grow up under the pile that may leach the nutrients. They may take all the beneficial nutrients from the pile.
Yeah, didn't even think of that. Like, I get it, but it makes complete sense. Like, obviously the plant's gonna want the nutritious stuff that you put right next to it. Like, it's like giving like a really nice meal next to you. Eventually you're gonna eat it. How about what's the danger of starving the worms? It seems that there's little danger in overfeeding them, but what's the threshold for underfeeding?
I would say they're actually it's less desirable to overfeed them, because then if you're overfeeding them, they're not able to keep up. The food waste kind of rots and might get a little smelly, and might really start attracting like more than just fruit flies. So overfeeding, I feel, is like more harmful. And then underfeeding them, it's kind of hard to do because they're already slow eaters. They can go days without eating. So even my most active bin that I showed you all the way on the left, even if I was just feeding them like one banana peel a day for all those worms, I don't think it would really hurt them. It would just probably slow down their reproduction and they wouldn't multiply as fast, but that's okay.
Cool. Yeah, good point. We had one more. I think this one a little bit answered, but are maggots a red fly for the compost, or are those just the black soldier fly larva? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think no matter backyard composters in Florida around this time, you're gonna see like little larvae squiggling around, and that's the black soldier fly larva. They're not a problem. They are slightly gross, but they're just gonna eat the food waste and recycle it for you. So, and then they grow up, they turn into flies, they lay more eggs, and then they die. So
Okay, yeah, so not too much of an issue then. Perfect. Do we have any other questions from our audience? If you do, get them in now. But I just wanted to say thank you to Charlie and O-Town Compost. I'm going to post the website one more time in there.
yeah.
If you want to sign up for the service, the door-to-door service, or if you're looking to get into the worm bin, yeah, he's got the red wrigglers that are perfect for the heat right now. It seems like we're going to get at least a few more waves of it before we get any. So definitely check that out. Charlie, thank you so much. Anything else from the audience? Actually, a couple.
No problem.
A couple just came in right now. You mentioned you're hiring people in the future. Do you email people? Would they email you about that, or would just kind of not really?
We have on our website under the About tab, we have a couple job positions that we're not looking for currently right now, but we're trying to fill in the future. Hopefully in the next few months when we grow. So yeah, and encourage you to email me about it too.
Right on. Let's see here. We also have one. How many days the worms go without food? Do you know anything about that?
Like if worms didn't have any food, yeah, I don't know the exact number of days, but from my experience, I would say you can probably, I would do it for a couple of weeks, and I don't think that would affect them.
Cool. And then someone was asking if you've done any bokashi composting, and if you would want to elaborate on that in the future, or if you've even,
So kashi composting, yeah, I haven't done it, but I would really like to try it out someday. What I have done is a ton of lacto fermentation of vegetables. I love to make my own sauerkraut, kimchi. I love to make like mead and apple cider vinegar. So it's kind of a similar process to that, except it's food scraps, and like there's a grain or a brand that you're adding which spurs the bacteria to do their job. Whereas if you're making sauerkraut, you have like a saltwater brine which is spurring the microbes, the bacteria. So I imagine it's kind of similar to that, but I would love to try it out. I know there's a couple, you could buy a kit off Amazon or offline. You could buy like the brand, and everyone has like a 5-gallon bucket and a lid. You could just test it out yourself. And then when you're done with the food waste after it's already been fermented, imagine like the universe of microbes that are in that. You would kind of dig that into your raised bed or into your garden, and that's going to really like spur the plant growth, because plants, they feed on carbon. Well, actually, plants feed on the nutrients in the soil, and microbes are actually called the nutrient taxis. They bring the nutrients to the plant roots. So you want your soil to be very alive and full of microbes. And in exchange, the microbes eat the carbon that the plant brings down through their roots when the plant is like breathing in that carbon dioxide. So
sweet. So if you start doing anything with that bokashi method, for whoever posted that in here, please just let us know to see how it goes.
Yeah, I'd like to do another presentation on the bokashi method once I get it down.
Right on. We'll definitely be in touch. Natalie was just checking out about the worms without food to make sure that they didn't need a pet sitter for them. So we're good to go on that. And thank you again, Charlie. Don't see any more questions in the chat, but please fill out that survey. Check out the O-Town Compost site, and thank you guys, everyone, for coming. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Josh. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to find out when we have new fun and informative videos for you. Orange County Library System is your place to learn, grow, connect.